Today, we're going to take a closer look at the physical phenomenon of magnetism. For thousands of years, people have marveled at this mysterious force of attraction and repulsion. Around 600 BC, the ancient Greeks had noticed that a certain type of stone, called lodestone or magnetite, possessed these remarkable properties. A few hundred years later, around 200 AD, during the Han Dynasty, the Chinese invented the compass, a magnetic device of extraordinary importance. Incredibly, it took 1,000 years after its invention before the Chinese realized its usefulness as a navigational tool. Fast forward to today, there have been thousands of other inventions that all rely on magnetism. For example, you may use magnets to secure your best artwork to your family's refrigerator door, or you may know someone who has had to get an MRI scan. Yes, magnetic devices are ubiquitous. And so I just showed a picture here to the left. There's a compass and a map. The compass is a very useful device that helps people identify where they are and where they're going. And to the right, we see a patient being prepared to go into an MRI. This is an incredible piece of medical equipment. It's a non-surgical way for doctors to see inside the human body. And there's a little thumbnail picture of the human brain. I mean, that's truly a remarkable development that somebody can look at your brain and then a few minutes later you can just sit up, get up back to your feet, walk out the door, and you're not recovering from any kind of surgery or any pain at all. So it's really amazing. Okay, so let's start off by talking about polarity. What is polarity? Well, we can experience magnetism firsthand. What I've done is I've purchased a whole bunch of these magnets. This is just a small batch of them. I think I got 50 of them. They're really cheap. Picked them up over at Hobby Lobby. And I went ahead and marked them north-south. I can tell you how I knew which was north and which was south. But I got a paint pen, also Hobby Lobby. And I want the kids to take magnets, 2 each, and start to play with them. See what kind of interaction they experience. They'll start to feel, if you're holding north to south, an attraction. And that attraction gets stronger and stronger as the two magnets get closer and closer together. And if you flip one the other way, so you've got south to south or north to north, you feel repulsion that gets stronger the closer you try to hold these together. And these are pretty powerful little magnets. One thing I should mention is make sure that this is for an age group that's not going to be tempted to put them in their mouths, because if you swallow magnets, it can be a really big deal, especially if you swallow more than one, because they can snap together in your gut, and that requires surgery. So just make sure that we're not giving this to little kids, or if there's siblings around that are young, just be careful, okay? As a parent, that's something that I'm always concerned about. So anyway, I just want to show that these are the magnets that I picked. You can pick others, but try to get ones that are made of this particular material instead of spending a fortune on the rare earth magnets, which are much, much stronger and can sometimes pinch fingers depending on how big they are. And don't get the flimsy ones that are the refrigerator magnet types, because those are made a different way and they aren't going to demonstrate the north-south polarity quite as effectively. So what I do is, here, I'll just flip it over here to the second page. We have a little table here, and I can put this PDF out there for you to download. But what we want to do is we want to have the kids play with north to north, south to south, north to south, south to north, and identify whether or not they attract or repel, and then compare it to the phrase opposites attracts and likes repel. Does it make sense? If there's multiple kids involved in the group, have them talk with their neighbor about this and see if they can understand a little bit about it. They might start talking about how they feel that the attraction gets stronger the closer the magnets get together, or they might start doing interesting things like put them on side to side. They're going to start to get really curious about it, which is great. Okay, and then what we're doing here is we're observing a property of magnetism called polarity. And polarity shows up in other areas of science too, like electricity, but when we talk about polarity as it relates to magnetism, we're saying that all magnets have both a north and a south pole. In fact, if I snapped a magnet in half, now if you can imagine this was one big magnet, let's say you didn't see the lines here between the individual magnets, it's just one big long magnet with a north end and a south end. If I break it in half, I don't have just a north end in one hand and a south end in the other. I have another north-south pair of magnets. And so you might be asking, is there any way to break a north pole away from the south pole and just have it isolated? And currently the answer is no, but there's nothing about the physics that says it can't be possible. It's just one of those things that if you could figure it out, you'd instantly win a Nobel Prize in physics. Okay, so let's move on to the more interactive part of this. What will magnets pick up? So let me go ahead and flip to the next page. This is where we've got a bag of stuff that I get from Hobby Lobby and Home Depot. So here's my bag. I just put it all together in a very small little half sandwich bag. This I will talk about later. It's for the electromagnetism part, and we're not going to do that in this video. So I'll set that aside. But I've got a spoon, and it's actually a little party spoon. It's made of plastic, but I like this one because it looks like it's metal. So it makes the students think a little bit about it. So we'll set that aside. We have a rubber eraser that you'd stick on the end of a number 2 pencil. You know, nice cheap material, but it's rubber. We have a steel paper clip. Make sure it's a steel paper clip and not an aluminum paper clip. They typically are steel. The cheapy ones are steel. And that can be picked up at probably Hobby Lobby. I actually got that at Office Depot. So I put a penny in there because it's metal. So I don't want them coming away thinking that all metal objects are magnetic. But I put in a second paper clip. That is for a different project. That's going to be another video where we build an electric motor. So stay tuned. We'll talk about that one later. So I'm going to set that aside. And what else do we have? We've got a glass marble. Again, small bag of those is very cheap. And then we need some lightweight stuff. One of the things I put in there is a staple. The easiest way to do this is just open the stapler up and just go ka-chink, 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 and then you've got yourself a whole batch of individual staples. We want something very light. I'll show you that in a minute. This is a big old nail that is also for the electromagnetism experiment. And the only thing I did to this is I took a file. It's a little bit of extra work, but I took a file, I don't know if you can tell, and I dulled the end so that you can do that and not hurt yourself. Again, safety first. And speaking of safety, we have a sewing needle. Technically, it's not a sewing needle. This is what's called a tapestry needle. I don't know why it's a little bit blunt on the end, but it is. It's not as sharp as a regular needle, but still, it could hurt some softer skin. So just let them know that they need to be careful, that there is something that could poke them, but we need this for our experiment today. It's really cool what we can do with it. So it's an essential. One other object that I put in here, it's a little bit weightier than the needle, is just a finishing nail. You know, very small finishing nail that's smooth-sided. It's just a pretty cheap little nail that you can either get at Home Depot or find in a junk drawer. Okay, so those are all my objects. And what I want the students to do is take one or both of their magnets, in this case I got them stuck together here, and just go around and check to see if it's magnetic. So we've got the paper clip, and sure enough, the paper clip being made of steel is indeed magnetic. So we'll set that aside, and they can write, does it attract? Yes. How about plastic? Well, plastic, I just put plastic. I didn't say spoon. I just want them to think about it. It's like, oh, they look at this and they say, maybe this is metallic, but it's not, there's no feeling of attraction. So then they realize, oh, it's plastic. I guess plastic is not attracted by a magnet. So they write no. And then we go on to the staple. Now, this is an obvious one. It just lifts right off the paper, which is pretty cool. I mean, I don't know if you can see this, but I'll try to do it from the side. Look at that. The kids might find that pretty interesting, that they can cause a thing to actually fall upward and stick to the magnet. And it doesn't matter which side you're using, north or south, it's going to cause the ferromagnetic materials to stick either way. So let's see, we move on to the glass marble. Of course, glass does not have iron content in it, so it is not going to work. And then we get to the rubber eraser, same deal, no attraction there. The penny, this is one that's it can get some of the students. So they're like, oh, well, metals, they're obviously magnetic until you try the penny, which, these ones that are made after 1982 are mostly zinc with a little bit of copper plating. The pre-1982, they're made of copper, tomato. Neither one of them are going to stick because they are not made of the ferromagnetic materials. I don't include the needle or the small nail, mainly because, I'll show you, if I put the needle over here, and since it's so light, it can do kind of what the staple did. Ooh, and if we're not careful, we might stick ourselves. So I just leave that one off, and we'll just use the needle for the later experiment. And then there's also the nail. I don't include that one yet either, but that's okay. If you want to add anything else to this, you can modify the table, and it's fun. The kids have a good time with it. So as it turns out, there are only a few types of materials that can be picked up by a magnet. These materials are called ferromagnetic, ferro meaning iron. But it's not just iron. It's anything made of iron, nickel, and or cobalt. We just don't talk about nickel or cobalt very much, but all three of those materials are considered ferromagnetic materials and will be attracted by a magnet, with one little exception. Stainless steel. Stainless steel is an odd one because most grades of stainless steel are non-magnetic, even though there's a bunch of iron in stainless steel. Just something about the chemistry we don't need to go into, but most likely you're not going to be able to pick up something like a stainless steel knife, fork, or spoon out of the kitchen with a magnet. But a stainless steel refrigerator door might be magnetic, and I think that's in part because the refrigerator door companies, they know that people like to put magnets on the doors. And if you've got stainless steel that doesn't have that magnetic property, then it's going to disappoint customers, and they might actually swap it out for a different brand of refrigerator. So most of the stainless steel refrigerators, I should say, are starting to do the magnetic door, magnetic stainless steel. So kind of curious. But anyway, let's go ahead and move on and talk about what makes a magnet a magnet. So if we were to zoom in, way in on a magnet, then we'll see the little crystals that make up a ferromagnetic material. So each of these little crystals, I'm kind of showing a few of them zoomed in on this little spot here on this magnet. And you can see they're little jagged bits, and they got little north-south polarities, little guys, little N's and S's here. And depending on which way they're lined up, will tell you how strong of a magnet this is. So if they're all randomly oriented, then you're not going to have, it's going to kind of cancel itself out. There's not going to be any net magnetic field. But if you could get all of the crystals to move in the same direction, all the north pointing, say, in this direction, then you're going to have a north-south net effect, and that's what's going to make a magnet. So in this one, I tried to show that each one of the ends is kind of pointing towards the top, and the souths are kind of pointing here, but this one's backwards. This little crystal is counteracting what these other guys are trying to do. And so we could make this a little stronger if we were to somehow comb all of these crystals in the same direction. Okay, so we've talked about what magnets will pick up. And so now I want to do one other thing before we move on to making our own magnet. I want to bring in that small nail. So if I take the small nail and I take my magnets here, they're stuck together as one, and I pick up the nail, okay? Now I'm going to dangle it over the staple, if I can pick it up. Okay, so here's the staple. Here's my nail stuck to the magnet, and I'm going to hover it over, and look at that. So what I want the students to do is discuss with each other what just happened to the nail as it came into contact with the magnet. In fact, I wonder here if I were to disconnect it just a little bit. Look at that, it's still sticking. If I move it away, oh my goodness, it's still sticking. So I actually made this, made the nail kind of magnetic permanently, didn't I? Oh my goodness, let me move this magnet out of the way. Okay, see, it's so lightweight, it's actually picking it up. So let's do this instead. Let's try, I wonder if it'll work with this paper clip. This will be a little bit more substantial. Okay, so I can pick up the nail and the paper clip, so it's dangling around. Now I'm gonna try that again. Let me make sure you can see what I'm doing here. I'm gonna just move the nail off of the magnet just a little bit, and it's still holding, but if I do this, the paper clip is so heavy by comparison to the tiny little bit of net magnetic strength that's in here. This is like a few more crystals are winning out and making a small magnetic strength on the nail. And so it will pick up the staple just barely, you know, but it can't pick up this guy, this paper clip. But if we attach it to the magnet, all right. So this is the sort of thing, like, kids can play around with this for like 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and try to understand what's going on here. Why when I take this off, does the paper clip drop off the nail, but when I take it off the magnet, the staple doesn't fall off? And you can talk about it in terms of those little crystals. Okay, I think I've discussed that quite a bit. Okay, so let's move on. We want to make our own magnet. And believe it or not, this is something that most adults don't know you can do. And it's actually really cool. You can take a metal object that isn't particularly magnetic, and you can create a permanent magnet out of it. So you have to start with a permanent magnet. And what I want to do is take my sewing needle in one hand, I'll match the diagram, and my magnet in the other. I want to drag the magnet away from me and down the length of the needle. Now, what I tell the students to do is go ahead and grab the sharp end. I know it sounds crazy, but if you pinch it, there's less likelihood of you getting stuck. And what I want them to do is take the magnet, one side or the other. In this case, I got the south side touching the needle, and I drag it across. And then I lift up and return back, and I just drag it again. Uh-oh, I just moved my camera. There we go. So I want to just keep doing this about 100 times. Okay? And what I'm doing is I'm actually combing those little crystals inside of the steel here. This is steel needle, and so there's little bits of iron, little crystals of iron, and they all have their little north-south. They got their polarity. And what we're doing is we're just kind of forcing them to rotate a little bit. This is microscopic level stuff, but we're causing them to rotate and align into a common direction, and that's what's going to create a magnet out of this needle. Okay? All right, so I've done this quite a few times, and hopefully that's enough. It might not be. Maybe a few more times would be helpful. But let's see, just as a quick test, if it'll pick up this staple, okay? Or move it around at all. Oh, okay. So it's got enough to pick up the staple. So I'd say I'm convinced that that's a decent enough permanent magnet for what we're going to do next. So I'm going to set the needle down, flip to the next page, and this is where it gets really kind of cool. If you aren't blown away by the stuff we're doing already, this will definitely do it. Okay, so we're going to take the cup in our lab kit and place it in the center of our bowl. And I've already done this. Here it is, cup of water. I put it in a little plastic bowl in case things spill. Okay. So I fill the cup with water, and now what I want to try to do is place the needle horizontally onto the surface of the water. Now, it's important that the water isn't moving around too much. It's nice and still. We're not bumping the table. And this is what might frustrate the students a little bit. And I'll show you a workaround to this in a second. But what I want to do is I want to show that we can take this needle and get it to float on top of the water. So the needle can float on top of the water because of the water's surface tension. This is a really cool phenomenon about water. It's worth investigating. We'll look at it at a different time. It's not for today, but it's something that kind of piqued the interest of the student, that there's something very odd about this, because this is just a piece of metal that should sink in water, but it's actually floating because of the surface tension. And you can compare it to the little bugs that you might see running around on the surface of a pond. These little water striders, they're taking advantage of the same surface tension as they're running around. They have very, very tiny little hair-like legs, and they can actually run on top of the water because of that surface tension property. So it's pretty cool. But let's see if we can get it to float. If we can't, I'll show you how you retrieve it. So let's see. I'd like for it to work the first time, and then I can intentionally make it sink and show you how you can retrieve it, but we'll see. Okay, you ready for this? I'm gonna hover this thing horizontally over the water surface, as horizontal to the water surface as I can, and I don't want to touch the water with my fingers. I just want to let go of the needle like that, and look at that. It's on top of the water surface. Now, if this doesn't work, if this frustrates the students, then that's okay. What we can do instead is we can take a very thin piece of paper, or a very small piece of paper, and we can float the piece of paper on top of the water. And it could be a little piece of wax paper. That would be even better, so it wouldn't get soggy and sink. But like a little piece of wax paper, it floats on the surface, and then you put the needle on the wax paper, and it'll do the same thing. I just like this, if you can get them to do it. But there's something interesting when multiple students set this up, because you have them look at their neighbor's needle in the cup, and you're going to see that all the needles are oriented the same way. They're all pointing in the same direction. And so you're like, well, what's going on there? Well, if I take my magnet and I start to bring it close to the needle, you'll see it interacts with the needle. Watch this. Whoop, it's attracting, but it's more than just attracting. Look, it's actually rotating. In fact, if I take the north side, okay, we see it's pointing towards the north. I can rotate it this way, pointing north, pointing north. All right, but if I let it go, it's eventually going to drift back to the way that it once was. So look, and it's going to right itself some more. It's going to come back the other way. See, look at that. All right, so you already know that you magnetize your needle. That means the needle has polarity, a north pole and a south pole. And earlier, when you were testing things out with your two magnets, you felt an attraction or a repulsion between the two. So if the needle here is feeling an attraction or repulsion that keeps it in this direction, what is it from? After all, there's just one magnet on the water. Where is the other magnet? Believe it or not, it's not the original magnets that I gave you. We just showed how those can move the thing around easily if we bring it close to the cup, but I've got these magnets far out of the camera here where they're not affecting this needle at all. So where's the other magnet? Okay, and so you have the kids kind of talk about this, and probably one of them is going to realize that since we're talking about a compass, the other magnet that we're looking for, which is much, much bigger, is Earth. Earth is a big magnet, and it's strong enough to interact with the magnetized needle, at least in this experiment. And of course, if you were to take this needle and just put it on the paper, Earth isn't going to be strong enough to be able to move the thing around on the paper. But if you put it onto this nearly frictionless, slippery surface of the water, the interaction is very noticeable. So what we've made here is a compass. And now to go back to what I was telling you before, I put the little north-south on these magnets. Here's how I did it. Here's how I knew which side was which. I set this experiment up. I did this first. I made the compass needle, and I know because the sun rises in the east and sets in the west, so in this particular room, I know that this direction, I shouldn't have my magnet in my hand, this right here is pointing north. So the north pole of the Earth is attracting what? Opposites attract. It's attracting the south end of the needle. So if I bring my north side to the needle, look at that, it attracts. So I know that this is indeed the north side of the magnet. So if I flip it over, I should be able to get that same end of the needle to move away. South pushes it away because south to south likes repel. So we've got confirmation here, and that's what allows you to label all of your magnets, which is kind of cool, huh? Okay, so let's go to the last page of the permanent magnet. Oh, I was going to sync this first, wasn't I? So let's say I sync the needle. Now, you might be tempted. I make a joke with the students. I say, oh, yeah, you can go fish it out with a spoon, but you don't need to. Do we have an invisible force that allows us to pull that needle? We certainly do, and hopefully they can see that, or they recognize it from what they've learned so far. If you bring this magnet close to the needle, it will attract right on up. And look at that. I didn't even get my fingers wet, and I've got my needle back. Okay? And then, of course, I can try again to see if it'll float. And there it is. It's floating again and orienting itself. All right. So there's that part of the experiment. I'll move that out. We'll get to this last page. I do mention that in some wilderness survival books, they'll tell you to bring along a small magnet and a sewing needle whenever you go hiking in the woods. That way, if your compass gets lost or broken, you'll have a backup that you can rely upon. You just need to find a big broad leaf that'll hold a puddle of water, and you can magnetize your needle. Boom, instant compass. Now, personally, I like to magnetize small screwdrivers. And that way, when I'm replacing the batteries on my kids' toys, you know how you have to flip the toy upside down and you've got these deep kind of wells where you see those little screws and you have to, twiddle the screwdriver and you finally get the screw to be loose. Well, it'd be nice if you could just extract it without having to flip the whole thing upside down and have like 6 or 8 screws go bing, 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 and go flying all over the place. So if I magnetize my screwdriver, it'll stick, the screw, which is typically made of steel, will stick to the screwdriver, and I can extract it one at a time and put it in a nice little pile, and I don't have to worry about them flying everywhere. So this is what I'm talking about. Things like this, you kind of hold on to this concept of magnetism for your whole life, and when you see an opportunity to use it, you can use it. Like, just as another little example, I like to work on my cars, and sometimes a piece of steel, like a screw, a bolt, or a nut or something, a washer, will fall into a place that I need to extract it, and my hands are too big to get in there, so I can take a little magnet on the end of a wand, and I can grab the screw or the washer or whatever is trapped, and I can get it back. So kind of cool. Okay, so the final thing I tell people or tell the students is, whenever a magnet's able to keep its magnetic properties, like the one you're using right now, we call it a permanent magnet. And we're talking about lasting or intended to last forever. And this is to distinguish it from the next type of magnet that we're going to investigate. That's the electromagnet. And you can kind of give them a little teaser for the next week, and you can say, junkyards are known for using big, large electromagnets on the end of cranes to lift up junk cars in the air. They swing them over and they drop them into a crusher. And it's the fact that the crane operator can turn its magnet off and on. That's a very useful and interesting thing. We're going to create an electromagnet next week. And then once we've done that and shown that we can turn on and off a magnet, we'll use that concept, and believe it or not, we'll be able to build a very simple electric motor that they can take home with them. And that's where this wire that I was mentioning before comes into play, and the 2 paper clips and a couple other items. But anyway, I hope that this has been an interesting set of experiments. The whole cost of the setup is on the order of, like, if you're trying to do this for 15 students, you're probably looking at about $50 worth of cost. Depending on what you can just sort of scrounge out of your junk drawer, you might be able to get the cost lower than that. But it really teaches comprehensively what magnetism is, the fact that there is polarity, there's an interaction that can take place with our own Earth, which has a north and a south pole, not just geographic north and south, but an actual magnetic north and south. And it's pretty cool stuff. So like and comment and subscribe, and let's move on to the next experiment. And yeah, this has been Dr. Matt. I hope you've had fun. Thanks.